it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Two stories for you this evening that examine the weird and the macabre. Later on, we have The Knocker. We begin tonight's proceedings with A Stranger in the House. Part 1. Introductions. I'm not crazy. I know it makes me sound crazy to open up my first journal entry with a line like that, but it's true. I'm not crazy. Although my therapist, Dr. Brodsky, might beg to differ. I guess this really isn't going to win you over in convincing you that I'm not toys in the attic, bats in the belfry crazy, but I still need to say it. I'm not crazy. It's just a little reaffirmation to make myself feel a bit better. I think maybe explaining why I came to need a psychiatrist who would propose an idea like writing out my thoughts would make the most sense here. Everything started with a break-in. Luckily, no one was home. It was our family tradition to catch a movie every Saturday afternoon. To be honest, I have a hard time recalling what the movie was about, given what would follow. It was some animated film about a boy with magical powers fighting against the Moon Emperor. The kids saw it as a kiddie film, but slowly changed their minds midway through once the action picked up. Well, the missus always tells me that I should stop treating them like children, but I'm not ready to do that just yet, given my childhood. Anyways, we got home from the AMC to find the front door kicked in. I had my family stay in the car and get on the phone with the police while I investigated. I opened that garage and took the closest thing I could find to a weapon, which happened to be a Mondo bat. I silently cursed the fact that we didn't have any actual bats after the T-ball incident a few years ago. A few years ago, Jason tried to get Tommy to hold a ball in his palm for him to tee off with. One trip to the emergency room later to get his luckily unbroken hand iced, and real bats were taken off the toy list. Well, I hefted the plastic toy and prayed silently that the fact we'd painted it black to give the appearance of an actual bat would be enough to discourage any intruder as I searched the house. Well, the kitchen looked like a tornado had rolled through. They'd swept items off the shelves and onto the floor. A bag of flour had burst and they'd tracked it all over the kitchen. I followed the white powdered boot marks up the stairs towards our bedroom. My fingers were so tightly wrapped around the bat now that my knuckles were white. The door to our room was wide open. I stepped inside and saw that all of our clothes had been pulled out of the dresser and littered the floor. My billfold was still resting on top of the dresser. I peeked in the closet, half expecting to see the intruder in the shadows and covered in flour with a sinister smirk across his face. There was no one there. I cleared the room and continued to follow the flour track. The tracks were fading now as most of the powder was coming off in their boot prints, but I could still see the direction they were heading in. They were leading towards the kids' room. By now my heart was pounding like crazy and I was sweating bullets. My mind imagined the worst-case scenario as I slowly approached their room. I imagined opening the door to find an old, white man wearing my wife's panties, touching himself while looking at photos of my boys. I shoved the door open, almost driven to a blind rage by this dark thought, and charged into the room. Once inside, I was confronted with nothing. Toys and magazines littered the floor, but I couldn't tell if it was the work of the home invader or the byproduct of having a 10 and an 11-year-old living in close proximity. It was about this time that I heard the police arrive. I dropped the painted plastic bat and went out to greet them. Well, they chided me for searching the house on my own, but quickly segued into a rundown of the situation. I told them everything I'd observed and let them search through my house while I tried to comfort my wife and kids. The police investigated the crime scene for about 15 minutes, but they weren't much help. They theorized that it was a simple smash and grab due to the boot print on the front door and how everything looked hastily searched through. They questioned the neighbors, but of course the homeowners association had insisted on privacy hedges between all houses, so no one really saw anything. They took down our information and left about an hour later when it was obvious that the culprit had fled. They told us that they collected evidence, taken photographs as well as statements, and they promised to get back in touch when more evidence was uncovered. But we didn't hear anything back from them. Well, I would have written everything off were it not for a few things. The main problem was that I couldn't find anything missing. I even noticed that I'd left a billfold with money in it on the dresser that was untouched. We also checked our medicine cabinet and found nothing missing. Jewelry was left where it was, and other than peace of mind, it seemed like they hadn't taken anything. After a week of waiting, I called the police and asked them about the progress of my case. Well, they reasoned that the person was probably a first-time offender and was in a hurry. They explained that he probably saw that no one was home and made the split-second decision to break in. He probably frantically searched the house, but was so anxious about getting caught that he fled as soon as he saw that there was nothing of value out in the open that he could easily get away with. Well, their explanation worked for a while, but eventually the inconsistencies started to bleed through. There were some things that just didn't make sense to me. Why would someone go for the pantry first? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no burglar, but targeting the pantry and stealing food just doesn't seem like a very profitable plan. If it was a simple smash and grab, why didn't he take the billfold? There must have been $100 or so in it. Why would they wreck the place and take nothing? What was this person doing? I think this, in combination with the stress at work and home, was enough to push me over the edge. It started with a few sleepless nights. Anna, Jason, and Tommy spent the first night at a motel to try and help the kids come to terms with what was happening, while I opted to clean up the house in preparation for their return. Given that the police had collected all the evidence and taken pictures, I felt justified in trying to restore the disheveled home. I put everything that was salvageable back on the shelves and in the drawers, vacuumed the floors, and called maintenance in regards to replacing the door and changing the locks. While I was doing all of this, I took a few photos of my own, just in case the homeowner's insurance would balk at the idea of actually refunding us. I got very little sleep that night, as I was busy cleaning up the mess and trying to remove any trace of the burglar's existence from my kids. A reason that the previous few nights I was unable to really sleep were due to the stress of managing a locksmith, a repairman, and a cleaning service for any things I might have missed. Anna and the kids went to an amusement park that Sunday while I juggled all of these things. Jason and Tommy were seemingly unfazed by the event and went to bed without an issue. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep. I was tired but still on edge. Every creak and groan of the house setting off alarm bells. Well, Anna managed to fall asleep, but my constant getting up and checking everything probably woke her a few times. It wasn't until the third sleepless night that Anna suggested I go see someone. At first, I tried to explain that I was doing fine, but she persisted. It wasn't until she showed me my baggy eyes, tired face, and sullen expression in a mirror that I relented. I didn't want to worry my kids any more than I had. And this is how I first came to meet with Dr. Brodsky and have a few sessions. It's also why I'm writing all of these thoughts down now. We talked about what was going on with me, and she advised putting everything into words. At our first session, she said I have a tendency to compartmentalize these things, and that I need some sort of outlet. Well, I guess that's why you're holding this in your hands now. I always enjoyed writing and found it to be a relaxing way to deal with everything. I'll probably spend a little more time writing out some of my thoughts while I have some time off work. After hearing about my ordeal with the break-in, my boss even gave me a few days off to get my act together and repair the house. Now, with that lengthy setting of the stage, I think I'm ready to try and come to terms with everything and record my progress. Wednesday, August 17th, 2016. Went back to work today. Besides some initial awkwardness where people tried to get the full story about my absence, I was able to take my mind off of everything for a bit. While I could never make a career out of my writing, I did the next best thing. I found working at an advertising agency pushes me to be creative and use my brain. I slept a little better today. I'm still not getting a full night's sleep, but I did manage to drift off a few times. Saturday, August 20th, 2016. It's hard to believe that it's been a week since the break-in. The second session with Dr. Brodsky went well. I told her that I'd taken to keeping a journal as per her suggestion, and she seemed to encourage the idea. I asked her if she wanted to read any of it, and she told me that it was best to keep it personal so I wouldn't feel pressured to put on a strong front. I mentioned to her that I sometimes still think about the incident, and she said that was normal. She said it's a normal coping method to remember and try to come to terms with the trauma. I asked her to write me a note saying that I was normal for my wife to read, and we had a bit of a laugh. Life at home is back to normal. The kids are running around, and Anna is busy cooking up some spaghetti and meatballs right now while I write this. We didn't get to go to the movies on account of my therapy sessions, but there really isn't much playing right now that would be suitable for the kids anyway. Thursday, August 25th, 2016. Work was a bit of a pain today. We have an upcoming project that needs to be cleared by Friday, and everyone's running around trying to make ends meet. It's my job to get the ad properly formatted and set up. I must have spent an hour trying to make everything look perfect before I accidentally closed out of the program and lost all my hard work. I swore up a storm and had to stay a bit over while I redid all my work so we could meet the deadline. Saturday, August 27th, 2016. I didn't sleep too well last night. That being said, I am in a good mood. Want to know why? Well, the sessions ended today. Dr. Brodsky told me I was good to go. I was a little worried about my fitful night last night, but she explained it away by saying something along the lines of, "You're becoming healthy, that's all. You'll be healthier still this time tomorrow. I think that you're on the right course here, and while I'd love to keep charging you for a low-stress chat, I don't want to add more stress on your bank accounts. You're going to be fine. Just keep on the road to recovery." I left the office feeling better than I had since this craziness first started. I've decided to keep writing for a bit to chronicle my progress. I want to look back on this in a few weeks and reflect on how far I've come. Since it was the last day of my sessions, I couldn't get to the movies again today, and I had some quality bonding time with the boys. I asked them what they saw, but they just shared a look and said it was a secret. Can't wait to get back into our weekly movie tradition and return to some form of normalcy with my family. To be honest, that little side glance and knowing smile they shared made me feel like I was being left out. Sunday, August 28th, 2016. I'm willing to bet money that they saw a horror movie. Tommy was up all last night with nightmares. Of course, Anna slept right through it, and I had to sit by his bed while he asked questions. I brought it up today and she had this guilty look on her face. Well, Anna's always on me, saying that I can be a bit overbearing, and I understand, but I just don't want them to have the relationship that I had with my dad. I want them to look back on their childhood and remember the time we spent together as fond memories. Well, hopefully that's the end of the late nights. Tuesday, August 30th, 2016. Work continues to be a bitch. Compound that with Tommy's frequent nightmares and you have a recipe for a bad time. I woke up Anna to deal with it for the first time, but I had to go to the second time when he started calling for me. Anna had forgotten to close the door as usual. Tommy could never get to sleep with it open after watching an old episode of Goosebumps where a kid who was visiting his grandparents found that they'd imprisoned a monster in one of their closets. Well, the nightlight helped a little, but the closet always had to be closed if he was to get to sleep. As I was tucking him back in, he asked me a very odd question. Why would someone break into our house? I was taken a bit aback, as he hadn't really brought it up since the initial excitement had worn off, but I tried to answer it as best I could. I explained that he was probably looking for money, and when he saw that we didn't have any, he left. Tommy asked if he was gone for good, and I said he was. I also promised him that if he did return, that I would spank his butt and send him running home. That got a bit of a smile out of him, and I managed to get him back in bed by about 4 a.m. I got back in bed shortly after, but I wasn't able to drift off again. Of course, that got me thinking about the break-in again, and as I wasn't getting back to sleep that night, I decided to scroll through the photos I'd taken. Staring at the photos, I noticed something new that I hadn't seen that first night. In the photo I took with the flower, there was something odd. It looked like the person had intentionally knocked over the bag and then deliberately stepped in the 1-foot wide spill with both feet. If he's in such a hurry, why would he do that? It didn't make much sense, and it got me thinking. Saturday, September 3rd, 2016. 3 weeks since the smash and grab. Had another rough night last night. On the plus side, Tommy's nightmares seem to have passed. On the downside, I'm dealing with a bit of a head cold. In September, if you can believe it. And I couldn't get to sleep. I opted to stay in while Anne took the kids to another movie. This time I insisted that it had to be PG. Well, I know it isn't healthy to dwell on it so much, but the more I think about it, the more inconsistencies I'm noticing. The burglar had to have known that we'd be out for our family movie night. I didn't recall seeing anyone outside the house when we left that day, so that means that he'd likely known that we were going to be out at a certain time. How did he know our pattern? How long did he watch our house? Well, maybe if I dig into it a little more, I can make sense of everything. Sunday, September 4th, 2016. 22 days since the break-in. Still having trouble sleeping. I told Anne that it's just stress from work, and I think she believes me. She knows how frustrating the work can be sometimes. A company would start up an ad project and turn it down after weeks of work and make everyone start over again. I decided to walk around rather than keep her up with my tossing and turning. So I carefully walked around the house while flipping through my phone. It was while I was downstairs in the kitchen that I noticed something was wrong. The pantry door was open. Anne always closed it before bed, as we've had issues with rats in the past. I'll make a note here and bring it up with her in the morning. Monday, September 5th, 2016. 23 days since the home invasion. I don't think he left. I know that sounds crazy, but just hear me out. Anne said that she remembered closing the pantry door before bed, and this morning one of my cereal boxes was almost empty. I poured out Fruit Loop dust into my bowl and asked if anyone had had any recently. Well, no one copped to it. I told myself that it was my mind playing tricks on me, but tonight another piece was added to the growing evidence pile. I was walking around the house as part of my daily routine now, when I decided to check on the kids. I cracked the door open and looked into their room. The first thing I noticed was that the room was cold. It was like 10 degrees colder than the rest of the house. I opened the door and spotted the issue right away. Their window was wide open, and on top of that, the closet door was fully ajar. I know I shouldn't have, but I had to know. I woke Tommy and Jason up and asked them if they'd left the window open. Through groggy eyes, they told me that neither of them had done that. I pressed the issue more and said that I wouldn't be mad if one of them had, but they both said that they hadn't done that. I grilled Jason and Tommy for a few more minutes before I realized I was scaring them. I told them to go to bed and forget about this. Well, they looked at me weird, but decided to follow my directions. I took a peek into the closet before I left and saw nothing but darkness. I closed it and the window before leaving their room. And I didn't sleep at all. It feels like I haven't slept for so long. Tuesday, September 6th, 2016. 24 days since the home invasion. Now that I look closer, all the signs are there. I was an idiot to overlook them. The missing food just brought everything to my attention. The person broke in and tried to stage it to look like a smash and grab, but the truth is they never left. They're somewhere in the house. I see that now. And now I'm noticing things have been moved around. It's all small stuff, like a chair pulled out of the table or kitchen utensils put in the wrong drawer. Well, they're small things you wouldn't really register until you thought about them. The more I look at the photos I took, the more signs of them I see. They likely walked through the flowers so we'd be able to track their movements and search the whole house. They'd hidden so cleverly that we couldn't find them, and since we and the police fully searched the house, they assumed we'd feel safe that they'd already left. I checked the crawl space and the attic under the pretense of getting ready for Halloween. I didn't see any sign of him, but I expected as much. And this person is clever and cautious. He wouldn't slip up. I can't let the wife or my boys know that someone may be in the house with us. I have to protect them from this. Who's to say this person doesn't have some way of listening in on us? Well, if he knows I'm going to the police, what's to stop him from snapping and murdering us all? He may decide that he's tired of sneaking around and kill us all to evade capture. I have to outthink him. I need to catch him in the act or find some way to drive him from the house. Anna caught me looking at the photos again, but I told her that I was trying to figure out how to delete them. She offered to show me, and I jerked the phone away from her. Well, I think she assumed it was me trying to protect my pride, and that's a better excuse than anything I could have thought up. Don't you think I know how absurd this all sounds? But it is possible. Someone managed to evade detection for a year while living in a Japanese man's apartment, and you can't forget the one in North Carolina, where a guy sweet-talked his way into the house and lived there for 5 days while sexually assaulting the girl who'd invited him. God, it makes me sick knowing that this fucker could be living somewhere and coming out when no one's home or awake to eat and do God knows what else. Friday, September 9th, 2016. 25 days since the invasion began. Had a bit of a blow-up at work. I took the past 2 days off to keep an eye on things at home, and when I called into work today, I was told rather harshly that I either needed to come in or turn in my resignation. I set up my webcam to try and keep an eye on things while I was out and went into work. My boss stopped by my office shortly after I arrived to tell me that I needed to be taking things more seriously as we'd just been commissioned for another project and he needed my head in the game. I couldn't help it. I snapped at him and told him to mind his own business. I told him that it was hard to stay focused when I had my own problems at home. Well, he looked shocked for a few seconds before turning around and walking away. He didn't make contact with me for the rest of the day. I drove home in silence, wondering if I was going to get a phone call over the weekend telling me that I'd been terminated. As soon as I got home, I checked the crawl space in the attic again. I stared into the darkness for a few minutes, terrified that my eyes would adjust to the darkness and reveal someone looking at me from their hiding spot. I saw nothing. Anne asked me what I was doing, and I just told her I was looking around. Well, she didn't press the issue, but I can tell that she's getting worried. I have to take care of this quickly before I alienate my family anymore. Sunday, September 11th, 2016. 26 days spent with this stranger in my house. Still no call from my boss, but I have bigger fish to fry at the moment. I think the intruder is onto me. It's like I can feel him watching me everywhere I go. I don't know if he's looking at me from the closets, vents, or behind the sofa or chair, or whatever, but I can feel his eyes on me. Maybe he's turned my webcam against me and is using it to remotely monitor me. That would explain why I didn't see any signs of the intruder. Maybe he's erasing the videos or copy-pasting old videos to make it seem like there's no one there. But I know that can't be right. Yeah, he's somehow discovered my suspicions and is keeping an eye on me. But anything is possible. All I know is that he's focused on me. All this weekend I've had his eyes burning into me, constantly making me look over my shoulder. As I showered on Saturday, it was like he was standing right outside the curtain. Well, Anne, Jason and Tommy went to the movies without me that day. I think they know something is wrong. They caught me wandering the house, randomly opening doors, the pantry, and closets. They didn't even ask me if I wanted to go to the movies with them. They just left. They stayed out late and had dinner, which allowed me to search the house thoroughly. I have to catch this bastard in the act and get rid of him before he can get rid of us. I woke up this morning feeling his eyes on me from the closet. I sprung out of bed and wrenched the door open. There was nothing there, of course. God, he must have some means of slipping out that leaves no detectable mark on the wall. Anne was so startled that she started to cry. She keeps saying things about how I need to get help, how I need sleep, and how I need to start acting like myself again for her sake and the kids. Well, can't listen to her now that I'm so close to getting him. He's going to slip up soon enough, and I'm going to cave the bastard's head in for all the trauma he's put my family through. Tuesday, September 12th, 2016. 27 days with this stranger in my house. I got sent home from work today. I guess sitting at my desk and thumbing through photos of the house for hours wasn't the best choice. The security guard had to walk me out of the building into my car. He watched me drive off while shaking his head at me all the while. It doesn't matter. Feels like I haven't slept in over a week. I look, feel, and smell like shit. It doesn't matter. I heard my wife crying on the phone today with her mum. She was speaking in hushed words, but I heard her. She wants to take the kids to their house after school on Friday to get out of this place. It doesn't matter. I can feel his eyes on me no matter where I am in the house. I proved it by stalking around the house and feeling those eyes burning into me. And the entire time, I could feel Anna, Jason, and Tommy watching me warily. It doesn't matter. All that matters is finding the sadistic monster and ending his life. No police, no prison. There are too many opportunities for him to get out, for him to continue to watch me, for him to worm his way back into our lives. As long as I keep moving and check spots as randomly as possible, I'm sure I'll catch him off guard. I won't sleep until I find this bastard. Thursday, September 15th, 2016. 30 days with this stranger in my house. He's in the walls. I don't know how he's fucking doing it, but that's the only reasonable explanation for why I can't find him. There must be enough space to squeeze through and traverse the house using closets as entrances and exits. I could have sworn I heard him laughing at me behind one of the walls as I passed by it. Right, I'm ending this now. I'll tear down this entire goddamn house if I have to. No one threatens me or my family. Saturday, September 17th, 2016. 32 days. 2 days of Valium and Thorazine later, and I realized that maybe taking a hammer to all the walls in my house and screaming like a maniac was probably not the best idea. The police were called and responded fairly quickly. Unfortunately, they were a bit too late to stop me from scaring the hell out of my wife and traumatizing our kids. I think, for as long as I live, I'll hear Anna screaming and Tommy and Jason to hide in their room. She, of course, tried to stop me from entering their room with the hammer, but it was too late for me to listen to reason. I had to make sure he wasn't hiding behind their walls. In the haze of my delirium, I remember shoving her out of the way and seeing my kids shrieking and running from me. I think that memory is going to stick with me until the end of my life. Well, paranoid schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder, that was latent but triggered by stress. That's their current prognosis. They say they need a few more sessions to provide proper evaluation. Well, they have all the time in the world, as I don't think I'll be leaving here anytime soon. I asked if I could keep writing down my thoughts, and they tell me that I should be sharing those feelings with them rather than hiding them away in a journal. I think the only reason they're letting me write this last entry is so they can look through it themselves and try to figure out what the hell went wrong. The psychiatrist says that with a steady medical regimen, healthy diet, and a relatively low stress environment, I may be able to lead a normal life. Well, I ask if she thinks I can convince my family to return home with me. She says that it's possible as long as I'm serious about my rehabilitation and treatment. She's lying. I don't feel much like writing anymore. I just had my last scheduled dosage of Valium for the day, and it makes me tired. There was a stranger in my house. I can't deny that. I just didn't realize who the stranger was. I drove my own family away. I single-handedly managed to alienate my wife and thoroughly traumatize my kids in the space of a month with my insanity. I tried to protect my kids from everything and then expose them to the worst danger imaginable. An unhinged father. Well, in the end, I guess I was worse than my own father. He only ended up being a deadbeat. I became something much more frightening to them. We should have been at the movies today, as per our tradition. Watching something, anything, laughing and talking about the movie on the way back to the car. Instead, I'm here, and they're gone. Likely for good. In the few days of clarity haze that my treatment has given me, I've come to these conclusions. The intruder stepping into the flower with both feet was likely due to them trying to sidestep the open pantry door, which put them right on top of the small spill. The open pantry that night was likely from one of the kids grabbing a midnight snack of Fruit Loops and forgetting to close the door afterwards. The cracked open window in the kids' room was probably one of them airing out the room and not wanting to cop to it when their half-crazed father woke them up in the middle of the night, demanding to know who'd done it. The closet being open was a boy finally overcoming his fears. My family's fear wasn't them sensing what I was feeling. It was them realizing that I was going off the deep end. They were scared of me and what I was doing, wandering around the house at all hours of the day, endlessly staring at photos, and frantically searching every corner of the house. All of these things can be so easily explained, but yet, a part of me knows that I'm crazy. It's the part of me that can clearly see my children's horrified faces as I took a hammer to our walls to expose an intruder who never existed. And that's the part of me I try to listen to. It also is the part of me that I have the hardest time agreeing with in the dark of the night. It's because I can vividly recall the scene of being led away by the police after being tasered and zip-tied. I was a ranting and raving mess at that time, screaming and shrieking about the walls and what was lurking behind them. It wasn't until I was put in the car that I saw it. It was in the second-story window. I only saw it for a second, but I know it was there. That face watching me through the window with a wide grin. It was right in the lower pane, as if they were crouched down and observing the scene with some form of sick satisfaction. It had to be there, didn't it? The Knocker. Hi guys, my name's James and I have a hobby of interviewing people to get their scary story. It's crazy how many everyday people have experienced something paranormal in their lives, yet most people are still skeptics. It's like hundreds of people being a witness to a crime and the cops say it's still not good enough. Well, maybe that's why I got into this hobby. I wanted to know if I was going crazy. I wanted to know if others had experienced the things I have. So, here's the story that set me on the path of researching the paranormal. Part of me hopes I am just crazy. I hope the things that I saw that night were because of chemical imbalance in my young mind, because the alternative is just too terrible to consider. If I'm not crazy, then the Knocker is real. It was back when I was around 15 years old. I lived deep in the woods with my parents in Freedom, PA. Freedom was a small town northeast of Pittsburgh. Not a lot of people, and not a lot to do. Just a lot of forest. If you wanted to do anything, you had to drive to a neighboring town to find it. And that's what my parents were doing on this night. They both worked hard and rarely had time for themselves, so when a close friend was having his birthday party in a bar out of town, my parents decided to have a little R&R time. Well, they trusted me and knew I was responsible. they were going to be responsible too and stay at a motel if they drank too much. So I knew I had the house to myself for the night. Besides, I told my best friend, John, to come over for a night of wrecking noobs on COD. Even though I'd talked to him at school, I decided to call him to remind him. Well, I'd just gotten off the phone with him. He said he was 30 minutes out, when I heard 3 heavy knocks at the door. They sounded heavy and ominous. Well, I figured it was John pulling a prank on me. He must have been out front when I called him. Now he was pretending to be a killer in one of those crazy movies. So I opened the door with a smile on my face, expecting to see John's goofy ass jump out at me. But nobody was there. It was already getting dark, but I tried to look out into the woods. I couldn't see his bike or anything. "I'm going to lock you out here, idiot," I yelled out into the darkness. I waited a minute for him to come around the corner, or out of the woods, but nothing. I pulled out my phone and activated one of those tracking apps you and your friends can download. I saw my icon at the house, my parents all the way in another town, and John just leaving his home, at least 20 minutes out. I quickly noped out and walked back inside and shut and locked the door. I tried to imagine what could have made such a loud knocking sound. My mind went to killers with chainsaws and butcher knives, but I tried to say to myself, it was an animal or a bird. None of it made sense, though. I had the thought to lock the back door, and just like something had read my mind, 3 heavy knocks came from the back door further behind me. I spun around to listen. I listened for the sound of the door opening. I figured I might have to run out the front door, depending on whatever was coming into my house. After an agonizing minute of silence, I worked up the courage to walk into the kitchen where the back door was located. I peeked around the corner to look out at the glass window of the door. I couldn't see anything. It was pitch black outside my house. But I knew night hadn't fallen yet, and I should be able to make out the trees. But it was like a black curtain was draped over the outside of the windows. I looked around for an explanation of what I was seeing. I liked to keep the lights on, and they were on in the kitchen. Maybe the inside lights were putting a blinding glare on the windows so I couldn't see outside. So I reached over and shut off the kitchen lights. The whole room went dark and my eyes adjusted to see dark blue skies above the trees outside. But for just an instant, my eyes made out a dark figure standing by the back door. I blinked and jumped back in surprise and flicked back on the lights, and it was gone. At this point, I still thought my mind was playing tricks on me. There was an uneasy feeling in my house now. I felt like something could jump out at me at any moment. I didn't know what to do. I sat there and considered calling my parents. But what would I tell them? A soft knock came from the front door again, snapping me out of my contemplation. I turned to stare wide-eyed at it. This knock was different. Maybe it was John. All I know was I wasn't going to answer that door until I knew who was out there. I flipped out my phone and opened the tracking app. John's icon was gone. What had happened to him? The knock came louder. Boom, boom, boom. I felt my blood run cold. Had something happened to my friend? "James, bro, what's up? Open the door," I heard the familiar voice of my friend say. It was him. Or it was something that sounded like him. "Why didn't you just call my phone when I didn't open the door?" I yelled back. There was a pause. "'Cause the battery's dead. Now let me in so I can charge it, or my mom will freak out," John said. I figured this made sense and went to open the door. I was relieved when John pushed in and gave me a crazy look. I told him about the knocks and how scary it was, and he acted like I was trying to set up a prank to scare him and didn't trust me. "Oh, you know I can't deal with that ghost stuff," he said. "You better not have Brian hiding somewhere around here ready to jump out and scare me. I'll punch him in the face, I swear." I told John our mutual friend Brian was grounded for the next 2 weeks, or I would have invited him. So it was just the two of us tonight. I quickly forgot about the creepy knocking as me and John set my bedroom TV and Xbox up next to the big screen in the living room. We found our usual group of friends already online and started playing. We were having a great time. Me and John were wrecking shop in doubles. Now, there was the unavoidable exchange of trash talk between friends and frenemies through our headsets. Now, this fun went on for a good hour and a half. But things changed once John came back from the kitchen with 2 Cokes for me and him. He looked pale, haunted, scared even. He kept throwing looks back into the kitchen. "What's up?" I asked. "You see my ghost?" I joked. Well, I was already over the scariness from before. "Shut up, dude," he whispered harshly at me, his eyes still on the kitchen. "Let's just play. Turn up the volume." And we did continue playing, but John was playing like crap now. Something had thrown his mojo off. When he accidentally team-killed me, I threw off my headset dramatically to turn and look at him. He wasn't even looking at the game, or me. He was looking at the kitchen. Okay, I'd had enough. "John, what happened in there?" I asked with all seriousness. He just stared into the kitchen a moment longer before turning to me. "I heard someone calling me. It was quiet. It kept telling me to let him in. It was coming from outside." I saw him blink and there was moisture in his eyes. "It sounded like my dad, James. It sounded like my dad's voice." I couldn't breathe for a moment. Now I realized why John was so upset. His father had been dead for 3 years. I even went to the funeral. There had to be some sort of explanation. I racked my brain. Finally, I came up with something that would hopefully turn our fear into anger. "It's got to be someone messing with us. Some homeless guy or a friend from school. Next time we hear something, we'll go and kick their ass," I said, trying to gather up mock anger. John smiled at this. "Yeah, but I called dibs on your sword, though," he answered. He was referring to my cheaply made samurai sword that he'd bought from the mall for me 2 birthdays ago. And so we went back to playing. We were in a 4-man squad on Battlefield now. It was me, John, a friend from Australia, and one from Canada. And we'd all been a top-notch team since the early 360 days. We'd been playing a while when the Aussie started cursing under his breath about something. Well, this wasn't something new for him, but he sounded a little scared. "What's going on, Hawkeye?" he asked the Aussie on the mic. There was the telltale shuffling of a mic being moved before his voice came in clear. "Someone's playing games outside. Somebody keeps knocking on my apartment door," he answered in anger. "I'm not getting up anymore for it. I'm not playing stupid games with whoever it is." Me and James looked at each other. It had to be a coincidence, right? Hawkeye was on the other side of the world. "Mom, what?" came the voice of our Canadian friend. "The door's open. Come in." There was a ruffle of the mic as it was being taken off. There was a long pause before he came back to the mic. "What the fuck, guys? I'm alone in my house and someone's been knocking on my door. But I've got to get off. I might have to call the cops." "Hey, stay on so we know if you're okay," John interjected, but the screen told us he'd signed off. "Oh, that's weird, mate," said Hawkeye over the mic as James and I sat frozen in fear. And that was the last of Hawkeye, because the TVs, Xboxes, and the power shut off simultaneously. Me and James sat in the dark, the TV still letting off sounds of static from being shut off so quickly. James looked around frantically as I pulled my phone out to activate the flashlight app. Came 3 bangs from the front door. The hits were so heavy in the quiet house, I could hear it shaking the picture frames on the walls. We spun to stare wide-eyed at the door. I could feel my pulse pounding almost as hard as the knocks themselves. "We need to get to your room and get the weapons," John said breathlessly to me. I looked at him like he was crazy. "No," I said. "We need to call the cops." I was interrupted by a tremendous bang from the wall right behind us. It rattled the flat-screen TV with its force. Me and John took off like lightning out of the living room and down the hallway to my room. Once we slammed the door in my pitch-black room, I heard John scrambling to get the sword off of my wall. I heard the telltale shing of him pulling the blade free. I turned on the light on my phone, only to jump back from John brandishing the sword, fear in his eyes. "Call the cops," John whispered. I turned my phone around and dialed 911. I tried to steady my breath as the phone rang. When the dispatcher answered, I tried to keep calm and told her somebody was outside knocking at my door. She asked all the follow-up questions like my address, my name, was I home alone, and so on. She said a cop was about 10 minutes out. The power in the house turned back on, and eventually the cops did show up. The dispatcher called back to tell us to open the door for them. One of them snickered at the sight of John with the samurai sword. They said they checked around the house and found nothing. Well, I knew they thought we were just dumb kids getting scared when the power had gone out. They offered to call my parents, and I told them, no. I didn't want the cops telling them we were too young to be left alone. So they left, with a veiled threat that if we called 911 again, they'd have to call my parents to come back home. And so they left. Me and John felt embarrassed and a little mad. We had heard something, and we had good reason to be scared. We both tried to settle back into a normal night. I put on an action movie from Netflix, and we tried to forget about it all. Hours later, I'd say around 2 a.m., we were finishing up an episode of a terrible Netflix original. Both John and I were getting tired. I was about to ask him if he wanted to go to bed when I heard 3 rapid knocks at the back door. Well, it took us a while, but we scooted over to the living room door. We both poked our heads into the kitchen to look to see the window above the back door. At first, we saw nothing, which was weird. My house had a guest room separated from the main house. My parents had made it a comfortable living space with an AC, shower, and bed for when family visited during the holidays. And the guest house should be visible through the window of the back door. The guest house had a motion-activated light sensor mounted to the outside wall. Every night around 10 p.m., it activates with a low glow in the backyard, and if something steps in front of the motion sensor, the main light turns on with a blinding flood lamp, completely illuminating the backyard. But right now, we could see nothing. It seemed like the area outside of my house had dropped off into an endless void. We both heard a peculiar shuffling sound by the door, and we watched in horror as a small piece of paper was being pushed under the crack of the door, its edges scrunching up and collecting dirt off the floor. Once the paper was fully inside my house, the shuffling noise stopped. We were still leaning around the corner of the living room, halfway into the kitchen, our bodies close together, too afraid to move. It seemed like this could go on forever, both of us leaning forward, peeking, waiting for something awful to happen. And then something happened that made both of us scream, and it still sticks with me vividly to this day. The motion sensor light sprang to life, flooding the backyard with white light. As the blinding light hit our eyes, we both caught the motion of a dark shadow darting away from close up against the window. The motion light was at least 9 feet above the ground, hanging on the building, but whatever was retreating from the light was big enough to fill up the entire window and block out its light. All we knew is something gigantic had been blocking the window the whole time we were trying to see outside. And the motion sensor only activated when the thing decided to move away from the door. It took us another 30 minutes to gather up the nerve to see what the paper said. Well, we debated calling the cops again, but neither of us wanted our parents contacted, and only to be teased about it by the cops. Finally, with John close behind me with the sword, I darted over and snatched up the paper by the door. We retreated back into the living room before I turned it over to read it. It was only 3 words, written in curvy, blotted ink. Knock. Knock, knock. Now, John wanted me to call the cops back immediately. He said this was evidence, but I figured the cops would think we'd made the whole thing up. What was out there? Why did it want in? These questions terrified us as we went to my room to barricade ourselves in for the night. Neither of us thought we'd get a single wink of sleep. We were both too terrified to even close our eyes. And that's where it gets even stranger. John and I retreated into my room, lights on. We moved my dresser in front of the door. I had a baseball bat. John had his trusty sword. We agreed to stay up all night until my parents came back in the morning. And that's the last thing I remember. I was on my bed talking to John, who was sitting at the rolling chair at my desk. I remember that look of terror in his eyes. Suddenly, I was waking up in my bed. It was morning, the lights were off, and daylight was leaking in through my windows. I had a massive migraine as my head sloshed upright, my eyes burning, my temples pounding. I saw John curled up on the floor in fetal position. I tried to stand up and almost fell over. My balance was off and the room was spinning. I crawled over to John and shook him awake. And he started screaming and flipped around to grab me, his fingers digging into my shoulders. I had to call out to him repeatedly to get him to calm down. When he finally completely woke up, he started scratching at his chest and quickly pulled off his shirt. He had 3 red cuts running down his chest, dried blood smeared around them. Well, you could tell he'd been bleeding and they'd only recently clotted up. To our horror, we realized the dresser had been moved and the door to my room was open. Neither of us remembered even opening it or falling asleep. My parents didn't come home until later that evening, and John refused to stay at my house. He left back for his house while it was still nice and bright outside. I just huddled in my room until my parents finally came home. All this happened on a Friday night, so the weekend went by with no word from John. I figured he was still freaked out. I was still freaked out. I was having nightmares every night. In my dreams, I'd be standing at the back door staring at a twisted smile on the other side of the window. The smile was wide with too many teeth. The teeth were crooked and yellow. I could hear it on the other side knocking at the door. Boom, boom, boom. Then boom, boom, boom. Then boom, boom, boom. Every time I woke up in a cold sweat in my room, I swear I could hear actual knocking coming from somewhere in my dark house. When Monday came around, John wasn't at school. It wasn't until Tuesday that I was called into the principal's office. My parents and John's mother were all waiting in the office with a local cop. John's mother had been crying and was distraught. She asked me if I knew where John was. He'd been missing since school Monday. Once the cop grilled me for a while, they finally believed me when I told them I had no idea where he was. The cop pulled up a picture on his phone and flipped it around for me to see. "This is the only note John left. Do you know what it means?" he asked. My face filled with horror as I looked down at the picture. It was an image of a piece of notebook paper. Written on it in curvy blotted ink were the words, "Scratch, scratch, scratch." The worst thing was, it wasn't John's handwriting. It was the same writing as the note left at my house. Now, they've been looking for John for weeks now. Authorities are treating it like a potential kidnapping case. The FBI has even gotten involved. I tried to find the note that said knock, 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 but it's missing. I still haven't told the cops about that night. Some of the cops and volunteers are being instructed to look for a dead body now, not my missing friend. It tears me up inside. But I think he is still out there. I still have hope I can find him. I'm just afraid that if I find him, I'll find the thing that took him. The knocker. So, a couple of very weird and very wonderful stories for you there this evening. Which one did you prefer? They're both great, weren't they? Let's face it. But anyway, thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to say in the comment section below the video. And as always, I'll do my best to join in the chat. Well, back from Amsterdam. Had to go for a bit of business. I won't say any more than that. But it's the first time I've ever been, so it was lovely. Anyway, back to full schedule from now on. I haven't missed any of my usual upload times, but some longer stories coming. That's all I can say. Well, my dear friends, that is enough for one evening. Very tired after my time away. So, sweet dreams. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.